But one farmer says, seems to me there was a tea party in Boston that was illegal too.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
We shall seek to establish and maintain a dollar which will not change its purchasing and debt-paying power during the succeeding generation.
As anguished shrieks rose up from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Government credit and government currency are really one and the same thing. A reserve of gold and a small reserve of silver.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Some people still think it's money.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are on the planet. Welcome to the Junius Maltby Channel. And the reason I say that is because after looking at some analytics, I know a few of you were curious about this. Only 60% or so of the viewers of this channel are residents here in the United States, which was very surprising to me, and it was a fact I only learned a day or two ago in looking into the matter after a few of you raised the question. I found that quite interesting, so now I will have to say good morning, good evening, and good afternoon wherever you are. Amidst the backdrop of global debt, currency issuance, the expansion of the money supply, all of the things that we've talked about, and as we've touched on in the past, cryptocurrencies as well, as they are now a competitor, a factor, and a topic of discussion as it relates to all of this. We're going to incorporate some of that discussion today, digital currencies, and it's very important. So I know as much as it bores some of you, especially the metalheads here, like myself, the gold hawks, there is a part of that discussion that needs to take place as it relates to our understanding and viewing it, looking through the lens of the present time we are in when analyzing all of this. And I know we're kind of all over the place sometimes. We discuss everything from the geopolitics to domestic policies here in the United States and other news issues as it relates to government overreach and so on. And there's some videos that Miss Maltby is preparing that are going to be coming out shortly, so stay tuned for those. But today, we are going to take a look at some breaking news that was sent to me through one of the viewers here of the channel, and again, one of the supporters I've mentioned often and frequently, Paladin Stacker, and how this ties into all of the things that we've been discussing. We're going to take a look at China, and not only China and their digital currency moves, but also towards the end of this video, we're going to discuss, again, as always, gold and some global debt concerns as well. But all of these, again, tie together. They're all part of the same topic and affect each other in one way or another. We are seeing now in the news that China will be testing digital currency. Could it end up challenging the US dollar? China pilot testing its digital currency. Will the digital renminbi challenge the US dollar in the currency wars? People's Bank of China completes top-level development of digital currency. Chinese central bank digital currency shrouded in doubts. And then the final article here. China's central bank says it has completed top-level design of their digital currency. Let's dive into this first article. China to test digital currency. Could it end up challenging the dollar globally? So buckle up for the most boring channel on YouTube with some pertinent information. China is light years ahead of the United States in doing away with old-fashioned paper money. Now, China's central bank is preparing to test a digital currency, and some observers say it could mark the beginning of a new economic arms race challenging the supremacy of the US dollar. Already, hundreds of millions of consumers in China have grown used to paying for purchases without cash, using popular smartphone apps such as WeChat and Alipay. You know, quite often I use Venmo with friends or even Apple Pay with my smartphone. So I have used these means of payment where I don't use cash. You know, I'm guilty as the next person when it comes to accepting convenience. That doesn't mean I've rejected precious metals at all, but it has become a convenient way for one to transact in the arena of commerce in acquiring goods and services. I Venmoed an electrician once who performed some electrical work here on my home. Quote, everything is immensely convenient. I think that's the foundation here. People are looking for the convenience and speed of these transactions and the ability to pay. And this is, again, referring to China. Said Martin Chorzempa, a research fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Quote, you pretty much only need these two apps to do just about anything. You walk into a restaurant, scan a code, and order your food. You don't have to wait for a waiter. All the payments are automatic. It's quite extraordinary. Unquote. Chinese tech companies, counterparts to Amazon and Facebook, took the lead in developing this system. They leapfrogged ahead of their U.S. competitors out of necessity because China didn't start out with a well-established payment system built on credit cards. When Amazon started, it wasn't a major challenge to figure out. Well, how are people going to pay for the books that they order? Said Patrick Travanek, chief strategist at Silvercrest Asset Management. With China, a lot of people didn't have credit cards, so they had to come up with ways to facilitate their customers doing this. And I applaud the Chinese for that, not acquiring debt or not utilizing credit cards to make payments, but to use something that was more direct as far as having the cash on hand to purchase any goods and services. Now that tech companies have paved the way, China's central bank wants a piece of this digital action. The bank has been working on a digital currency for the last 6 years, but the effort shifted into overdrive last summer after Facebook unveiled plans for its own electronic form of money called Libra. Now, a lot of this article discusses the Chinese concerns over Facebook having this monopoly and does not want their people, or Libra, taking a foothold in their country. So what they are doing is coming up with their own currency that perhaps they trust or they will have control over this company, Facebook, and this individual, Mark Zuckerberg. Nobody wants him to be able to do anything with currency, and that's my opinion. I don't think he should, and I only wish for the demise of Libra. But we'll get into the crypto side of things a little bit later. A lot of you know my feelings on that, and we'll dive into that towards the end of this video, more so and in more detail. They are definitely one of the most advanced central banks in the world in thinking about and moving forward on this issue, Chorzempa said. The digital yuan is expected to function more like its paper cousin than a cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin. Its value is tied to the regular yuan, so it's expected to be relatively stable, and the central bank will be able to monitor every transaction so it won't have Bitcoin's anonymity. I know a lot of you just erupted, and I can imagine what about. Yes, this gives the central bank the ability to control a currency digitally. Are there major concerns with that? Absolutely. Do I have concerns over a cashless society? Of course. You know my sentiments there. We've covered this in videos in the past. This will give banks the opportunity to inflate currencies in ways never before seen. However, I believe they are already doing that. I think all central banks are inflating currencies digitally as we speak. Many of the currencies that exist only exist physically in the form of paper issued bills at a fraction of the total circulating supply. Much of it exists digitally behind the screens of devices and computers and in bank, not even vaults, but in bank computer programs. I don't recall the exact numbers, but there's something like, we're just going to throw the numbers out there. And it's respective to not knowing the actual amounts. But I believe there was only something like 2 or 3 trillion. Again, I'm likely wrong here, not entirely accurate. 2 or 3 trillion US dollars printed that are out there circulating and moving between banks and such. However, there's many times the amount of that supposedly held or in accounts. So it's kind of, disgusting to think about, but remember back in the day when they would issue more bills than there was gold, and that would create a problem. Well, now there is more currency issued than there is physical paper out circulating, because at no given time does everybody wish to hoard their cash or pull it from banks, and so they don't need that amount of bills out there circulating amongst the populations. there's many issues with all of that. However, with this, giving central banks this type of power, I think it will affect the price of commodities, especially gold and silver. But it's going to change the way currencies flow between nations and cross borders, and it's going to possibly have some conveniences, open up new opportunities in the speed of transactions and such. But with it is almost like a Pandora's box. As we open this, we are going to unleash the demons of greed and dishonesty that central banks have almost as their own, hallmark behavioral patterns throughout history. I mean, we've seen it before, and I don't think they're going to change. Ultimately, they want all of the money and all of the wealth for themselves, and they do everything they can to achieve that. But we'll continue here. Actually, the term that the central bank officials in China have used is controllable anonymity, which is one of the most Orwellian statements one could think about, Trorzempa said. I'm glad he says that, because that's absolutely true. One of the things that I applauded about Bitcoin at its inception, over 10 years ago now or so, or more than 10 years ago, early in the channel's history, when I first learned of Bitcoin, I believe it was in 2008 or 9, was the anonymity of it and the threat that it posed to central banks. I applauded that. I believed that even at its inception that a war had begun against the monopoly of currency issuance and the control that banks had over currency and units of exchange. I thought that Bitcoin posed an attack upon the central banking systems, and I liked seeing that. Now, what they're doing, I think the banks, is they're thinking, well, if we can't beat them, we need to join them or do something similar. And it's kind of like a Trojan horse in a way. Bitcoin, of course, will continue to exist, I am sure. However, it's going to most likely be shrouded in its all of the propaganda that we see produced about it, especially coming from mainstream banking individuals and politicians alike that see the threat that it poses and therefore tend to try to regulate it and attack it and control it in every way that they possibly can. And that's why I think some cryptocurrencies that are trying to kind of ride that fine line and work openly with government have a better chance at implementation and survival when it comes to cryptocurrencies being utilized in everyday practice and being used openly and accepted by government and officials and those that are in the halls of power. So if anything, let this broadcast not be my opinion as much per se when it comes to cryptocurrencies and their role and whether or not they should be used. Let's just use this. This is information. This is what's taking place. This is the weather patterns we are seeing. And it's information that is relevant that I think we should pay attention to. And that's why it's being reported here on this Junius Maltby channel. We continue here. We are right at the edge of a kind of gigantic technical change, James said. And this is later in the article, and this is true. This is a major, as many have said in the cryptocurrency world, there's a major change taking place, a paradigm shift in the world of finance and currencies. And we're right now in the middle of it. Or not even that, we're at the incipient stage, actually, with this dawn of the blockchain world. He says China's new digital currency could come to rival the dollar as an international means of payment. So what do we see there? A threat to the US dollar. Well, a threat to the US dollar means that the US dollar could fall out of favor, fall out of use, fall out of demand, which would then erode the dollar's power. And you all know what that means. Other observers are more skeptical. We're still in the very early stages of this, said Eric Nelson of Wells Fargo Securities. If China really wants to establish itself as the main reserve currency and try and dethrone the dollar, it's going to have to take a lot more steps on the governance front on opening up its markets to foreign investors. I don't think digitization is going to be the thing that does it. I'm going to use a term that might offend some, and I know it recently made its way into the Supreme Court, but okay, boomer. Okay, boomer. again, these guys that are in Wells Fargo and a lot of these old school entrenched financial institutions here in the United States, they're some of the slowest to adopt these new technologies or look at them favorably. I remember a conversation I had with the very president of my bank, and we had just briefly discussed cryptocurrencies, their role. And I have a family member that actually works for Wells Fargo, pretty high up. And I even inquired with them any discussions regarding cryptocurrencies on that front. And it's surprising to see these people really know nothing about it. They pay very little attention to it. And they almost don't understand that there is a new economy growing up around them. And it's so, the momentum and the velocity of this new economy, this blockchain cryptocurrency world is not going anywhere. It's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. And it's at the point where if they don't wake up and join it, because other countries are, and like we've seen here, China's kind of taking lead there. There's other countries doing similar things. Even the European Union is making moves in that regard. If United States banking institutions and United Kingdom banking institutions don't start playing ball and paying attention to this and getting in on this financial arms race, they're going to fall behind and lose it. That's just the way it is, the way it works. The first come, first serve. So again, I think individuals like this, these old school banking types that are in Wells Fargo, they might have fears or prejudices that are directed towards cryptocurrencies that are born out of a lack of understanding or knowledge of them. And that might be where their resistance to them is coming from. Digital currencies could make financial transactions cheaper, easier, and more efficient. To the extent they catch on, though, they could also trigger an upheaval in the global financial system. Very key point there. That is one of the things I think they fear. They fear change. Change is difficult for anyone, and it's most difficult, I believe, for uber wealthy and for financial institutions. Because let's read that part again. Could also trigger an upheaval in the global financial system. It's a pretty broad statement. A lot of implications there of what that could actually mean, what the consequences of all of this could mean, what the fallout could be. You've heard it before. A wealth transfer, those that are early adopters and people getting in on the right cryptocurrencies, could they be at the front of the line, and could their early investment into some of these, let's call them coins, even though we all know they're not physical coins, could that early adoption pay off in the long run when this becomes more mainstream, the demand goes up, and they're utilized? Yes, I believe that it's here. I believe it is happening. And I believe all profits from it, from those like us, if we do happen to make it with some of these, it would be to direct them towards metal in the long run, because ultimately this modern financial system is crumbling under what we're going to look at later, the burdens of debt. And they might have to use crypto to try to get out of that burden of debt. And I don't know how they'll do that, but it looks like there are plans in place, I would imagine, for them to do so. So again, an upheaval in the global financial system, regardless of whether they're sponsored by an American tech giant or the Chinese central bank. The next article, China pilot testing its digital currency. Will the digital renminbi challenge the US dollar in the currency wars? China's central bank has been working on digital currency for the past 6 years in an effort to usurp the US dollar from its reserves. Very important key point there. The majority of Chinese intellectuals called out over-reliance on the United States dollar and seemed worried about the safety of Beijing's massive amount of US dollar reserves. These scholars suggested the diversification of China's reserve and pressed the government to globalize the Chinese renminbi. Against this backdrop, to potentially unleash a currency war against the United States amidst heightening tensions with the Trump administration, the Central Bank of China is on its way to launch the digital renminbi. Almost overnight, China has transformed into a global economic powerhouse. The nature of money has changed, and with it has come to a cashless payment society in China. Hundreds of millions of Chinese citizens use popular payment applications to make purchases, such as applications like we discussed earlier, like WeChat and Alipay. It is easy to see how immensely technology and quantum macroeconomics have redefined the future of money. Since the inception of Bitcoin in 2009, many people have objected to the concept of fiat money, perhaps even challenging the perceived notion of the US dollar as a good store of value. A new era in the currency wars. Now the People's Bank of China is preparing to test the genesis of a global stablecoin in a bid to solve one of the biggest results of conspiracy in financial crisis. Several experts believe China's digital currency marks the beginning of a new era in the currency wars. It was unlikely that a digital currency could have the potential to challenge national currencies, yet as it turns out, projects such as the digital renminbi and Facebook's Libra could catalyze a new economic arms race against the dollar. Now remember, Libra is just a white paper, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even believe they have any traction whatsoever. And as far as I've paid attention to this issue, I believe they were dropped by two of their largest supporters, being Visa and somebody else. I know some of you guys in the comments will be more crypto expert than myself and can shed some light on this, but I believe Libra's been abandoned by some of the biggest names that were initially attached to it. I don't see it as gaining any momentum further. I think it's going to fizzle out at some point and be abandoned entirely. I don't have any faith in it taking off or gaining traction, not even here in the United States or anywhere. But let's pause and look at this paragraph and talk about it again and elaborate, because there are cryptos, and I'm not here to convince anyone to go towards crypto whatsoever, but I think there are some on the U.S. front that are making gains and progress in financial deals. Some of you might have a name in mind, and that company that is tied heavily to DC and to existing U.S. financial entities, as well as global financial entities. I believe they're tied with now the bank in Thailand, the Bank of England. You've got the MoneyGram deal. You've got a lot of connections taking place with, yes, that company we all have come to know of as Ripple, with the XRP token or XRP coin that they utilize. That is something that I know and have seen information on that the U.S. is looking at. They've had meetings with not only the Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson and those individuals, but it looks like that's kind of the U.S. approach to this, even though it's coming more from a private side. They are attempting to integrate and implement that as not a stable coin, but as a way to move wealth and move money by utilizing this blockchain technology. So if that were to see more stability and grow and be adopted somehow, could that be a U.S. answer to this? Again, I don't know. I'm not here to convince anyone on either side of that issue or even tell them to allocate anything towards it. It's just something that I've discussed with other individuals as it pertains to this. The fact is that programmable algorithms were initially not better storage of value, hence the rise of a volatile Bitcoin. A cryptographic asset that could easily skyrocket by $10,000 or even decline to as low as $1,000. Invariably, governments and central banks still had an upper hand in the financial ecosystem. However, Bitcoin and other altcoins, like the one we just mentioned, still maintained a vast potential as mediums of exchange and international remittance. Yes, Bitcoin and a lot of them have been quite volatile. But again, this is a new technology, a new industry, a new idea, and I would expect there to be, as it grows, some volatility that comes with that. But again, look at the amount of the overall market cap. If you look at the overall market cap of the cryptocurrency world, it is minuscule compared to anything else. It's almost unrecognizable when you look at a graph or a chart showing market caps of different asset classes and investment vehicles, anything from hedge funds to money markets and mutual funds and pensions, anything on Wall Street, the NASDAQ, the Dow, the S&P, the market cap of all crypto. Well, let's pause for a minute. Let's take a look at the overall market cap of all crypto right now as we speak. Taking a look over at CoinMarketCap, here you can see there's 5,035 upper left cryptocurrencies. That's all of them that they have listed anyways. And there's 20,317 markets for a total market cap of $238 billion, 450 million, 99,310. So 238 billion with a 24-hour volume of around $118 billion moving around. 238 billion, not a lot. Again, there's $5 to $6 trillion in just gold ever mined and hoarded on the planet physically. Now, think of just dollars in circulation. Again, we just discussed that earlier. There's trillions of dollars in circulation. You look at all the other currencies combined when it comes to all the fiat out there, again, trillions. All the other investment and asset classes and vehicles and markets, again, Asian market, the UK market, the European market, the markets we see in New York and Wall Street, trillions of dollars. You'll even see derivative market measurements in the quadrillions. So when you look at a market cap of 238 billion, it's a drop in the bucket. A drop in the bucket and a lot of room to grow. Now, when you look at the market cap of the big top three, these are the ones that any cryptocurrency individual would be aware of and knowledgeable of. You look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. Bitcoin has a total market cap making up around 66.3% of all of the cryptocurrency market cap at $158 billion. Quite a bit. Quite a big number you would think, but again, we just looked at, when you look at the scheme of trillions out there, it's not that much. And you can even see charts that reflect that. Ethereum, very small amount, 17 billion. And you look at XRP down there at 9 billion. It's been hovering around 10 recently. You've seen a lot of the XRP even at 10 billion. But still, very small market cap for even the top three. And if you add all three of those up, you're not even near the 200 billion or 180 billion or so. So it's not a lot of money floating around in the crypto world at this time. Meanwhile, China's central bank has been working on digital currency for the past 6 years in an effort to usurp the US dollar from its reserves. Figures have it that at least 58% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in dollars, while China could create an all-parallel new financial ecosystem presently dominated by giants such as PayPal and SWIFT. It is unlikely that it would catch up with the US dollar. China positions its digital renminbi as a stablecoin, and as it holds stablecoins are regarded as the quintessential stepping stones towards mass adoption of digital currencies. Despite the central bank's stature as one of the most advanced central banks in the world, the People's Bank of China shifted its acceleration forward following Facebook's plan to unveil a global stablecoin. Beijing worried that if Facebook would unleash its currency to approximately 3 billion of its Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram users, China's digital currency would be reduced to nothing. And I think that threat is overplayed. I don't think so. I don't know very many people that use, let's look at the average Facebook user. Come on now. These people aren't going to even know where to begin, I would imagine, or attempt to use digital currency just because they're on Facebook. Most of them are on there looking at cat memes and spying on what their neighbors or family members are doing. That's the only application they have for Bookface. China's digital currency would be reduced to nothing. I don't think that would occur because of Facebook. Sorry, not going to happen. Now, therefore, the bank geared its effort to complete its work quickly and is currently preparing to launch its first pilot test. That might be what they are saying the impetus was behind launching a cryptocurrency. However, I believe it's more nefarious, and you wouldn't even have to say nefarious. I think it's a bigger chess game than we think. They might say their motivation was Facebook, but ultimately I believe it is dethroning the US dollar and taking part in launching a volley of fire in this battle space that we see, the currency wars. And we've heard in the past that currency wars lead to trade wars, and trade wars lead to shooting wars, and so on. That's what this is. This is more of a game being played out in international finance between nations jockeying for position and monopolies over currency issuance, and a threat that they feel is posed by the world reserve currency known as the US dollar, or the Federal Reserve note. China is moving quickly to launch a similar idea in the coming months. If America doesn't innovate, our financial leadership is not guaranteed. Now, this currency war that we're seeing played out and this rise of this new technology is occurring on the backdrop in a world drowning in debt. It's almost as if CNN really just woke up to this. I mean, did they really just come out with this article on January 14th? The world is drowning in debt? As if nobody knew, as if they're the first to find it out and report it. Are you kidding me? This has been going on for quite some time, CNN, and we're glad you recognize that finally. Now, as we've covered the U.S. debt problem and the world debt problem frequently and in depth in other videos, we're not going to cover that today. I just wanted to show you that CNN is now waking up to it somewhat and reporting it. Well, we have the global debt, we've got the currency wars, and with that, we should discuss again, and we'll talk about it here, gold, debt, and the human heart. Looking at America losing a trade war, the manufacturing activity tumbling to 10-year lows, horrific GDP growth rate for 2019 marked an abysmal number 107 in the world. The outlook for 2020 is even worse. The government's debt to GDP ratio is more than 100%, and the rancid end of empire cake is now getting iced with maniacal debt-oriented warmongering. What an opener. Is it any wonder that savvy investors are flocking to gold? Absolutely not. Taking a look at the spectacular daily gold chart, we are seeing major support forming at the 1575 resistance zone. The author here discussing how the gold price will accelerate beyond this, and that it needs this, he predicted some things regarding consecutive closings above that key 1575 range. But yes, gold's chart is looking very promising. We've covered this pretty intensely over the last couple of weeks, looking at the wealthy, the elite moving into vaulting physical gold out of concern for what we're seeing play out geopolitically and economically. Now, I understand this was mostly a crypto-oriented video. However, I wanted to paint the picture that it does tie into these other areas of conversation we have here on the channel. I know where gold's going. You know where gold is going, and silver, precious metals as they relate to the destruction of fiat currencies. And it looks like that cryptos are becoming what governments might come to view as a solution to some of these problems. Will they be? I do not believe so. They might be a band-aid on the wound that they themselves have caused. However, central banking is ultimately the problem. And as long as they are at the helm, the controls, if they're in the wheelhouse, they will continue to careen us off this cliff of debt and destruction. And the more power we give them in when it comes to controlling currencies or issuing their own, quote, stable coins, it's just going to lead to the same end result eventually. And that's always depreciation of the currencies, manipulation of the currencies, control over the populace. And the only way to truly find freedom and liberty from these controls and these invasions to our privacy and to our wealth, the only way that we can prevent them from stealing our wealth is in things that they have no control or touch on whatsoever. So if we can control things like precious metals, and even, yes, to an extent, having Bitcoin in wallets and moving that around. However, you know my concerns with power outages and having things in thumb drives and computers and such. I've got a lot of concerns with that. The power consumption. I mean, Bitcoin currently, at just the levels it's being utilized now, I've read is consuming, 1% of all global electricity to hash out the algorithms and mine it and transact with it. So at any universal adoption level, if you have 7 billion people on the planet holding it and using it, it would become quite cumbersome and power hungry and all-consuming in order to use what has become a somewhat outdated form of the technology. Again, I know some of you will argue otherwise. What we're seeing, however, is a common theme: an economy in trouble, a world economy in trouble, not just one or two countries, a world economy in debt and in trouble, fiat currencies suffering, trade wars, currency wars. We've got these war-mongering fanatics in the halls of governments around the world trying to spend more in order to destroy more. Gold is the way for that. We know that. Now, when it comes to looking at the cryptocurrency side of things, is there some money to be made there in speculation and holding these, what some would term as fake monies or play monies, or what do you call them, Mrs. Maltby?
World of Warcraft money.
Yeah, she calls it World of Warcraft money. She likes to make fun of it. She hates crypto, and I think it's great. It's beautiful. She's got a very traditional mindset when it comes to World of Warcraft money. But it does serve a role at this point. It seems like at some point, in some way, there's a race taking place, and governments are going to be using it and adopting it. What the U.S. chooses to do, I do not know. How they will play their hand in this, I do not know. I know friends of mine, close acquaintances of mine who have more knowledge on the issue than I do, believe that there are cryptos out there that will in turn serve a purpose and serve a role in finance and likely be adopted or utilized by the governments that we know of here in the West and in the United States. We're going to close out. That's the discussion for this evening. 36 minutes of the most boring channel on YouTube. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe to our backup channel, Miss Maltby's channel. And don't forget to like the video if you can, if you did like it, and to share it to places where it is appropriate. All right, have a good rest of your day, evening, night, wherever you are on the planet. Thanks for being here.